renewable energy investments. And want to thank Italy very much. We have been working closely with Italy, supporting us in our geothermal development, supporting us in electrification, supporting us also in mini grids in many areas, and looking forward to working with them in the new emerging technologies of power to X, including energy storage, green hydrogen, stabilization of the grid, wide varied ideas, including even PPP in transmission facilities. So we are happy for all of us today, and we look forward to very fruitful engagement. To start us off, we will have a statement from the ministry. We're looking forward to see whether Engineer Julius Madani is in the call. I've not seen a name like that, but perhaps people change names. It could be joining with a gadget, I don't know. And then we'll go to Mr. Vigoti, who is going to talk about the Renew Africa approach, advocating for a new de-risk investment program, and will be introducing for us the Rest for Africa Foundation. And then after that, we'll turn to the industry, where we are going to hear from Enel Green Power about the industry interest to invest in Kenyan renewable energy sector. We then turn to European Investment Bank regarding EU climate and energy policy, issues about energy transition. Very good to hear from EU, and then from PwC about the main investment risk in Kenyan energy sector. Then we're going to have perspective, both from the public sector and also from the private sector. We'll have an open discussion. We're hoping that all the presenters will keep to the time so that we can have adequate time for us to be able to interact amongst ourselves and get to hear the views of each other from both the public and the private sector. So colleagues, I just want to check whether Engineer Julius Mathani has managed to join the call so that he can be able to bring the message of the Cabinet Secretary for Energy, who had delegated that role to Engineer Julius Mathani. Are you there, Engineer Julius Mathani? I don't seem to see him. So what we'll do is we'll wait for him. When he joins, he will still give us the opening remarks for the Cabinet Secretary. But at this juncture, allow me to now invite my friend, Mr. Roberto Vigoti, the Secretary General for Rest for Africa Foundation and other foundations also related, I know Rest for Med and others, to be able to introduce to us this new initiative about Renew Africa approach. Welcome, Mr. Vigoti.
Thank you so much for your introduction. Yes, indeed, we can keep going until we have the Secretary of the Ministry joining us. Now, let me just expand a little bit what was said before. Rest for Africa tries always as a foundation with the 36 member for almost 10 countries, European and African countries, to add value to the so-called acceleration of the transition in clean energy in Africa. And one of them is Renew Africa. Next slide, please. As you see, we found out that we want to have, with those 8 logos, you see the 8 pictures here, there are 8 sectors where we work, especially the missing link with UNECA. We do the regulatory and policy analysis of the country, access to energy very clear, mini grids model, the Grid Academy, training, vocational course, Renew Africa today job, Grids for Africa, a new launch idea to support the deployment of also the grid infrastructure, in addition to renewable, and then we keep
sorry to interrupt.
So our mission is to work toward creating favorable conditions for scaling up investment in energy technology. So this is typically our main goal, and we do this through those 8 areas. Next slide, please. In the next slide, you see we gather together also additional actors. You see many of them are not members of Rest for Africa, but the European Investment Bank, EDFAI, EDF and the North Fund, particularly those, say, financial institutions. And we launched this one study in 2019.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's a lot of background noise that is making it extremely difficult to hear, and several people are in the chat saying they cannot hear. Can those who are not speaking please mute your microphones?
That's a great suggestion. I hope everybody's muting themselves. That will do it. Is that better now?
Let's carry on, Mr. Vigotti.
Okay. So you see, Rest for Africa is one of them, but actually there are many, many other entities who support the idea as an industry-backed initiative, advocating the creation of a comprehensive European program for renewable energy investment that is to be owned and managed by the institution. We found out that too many and fragmented instruments exist, from 50 to 70, but no one of them is effective and does a real impact on the transition toward a massive deployment of energy. So in next slide, I capture the essence of the renewAfrica. We want to really be country comprehensive, should be applicable to any country who wish to do so, to cover all technology in renewable, but also should cover grids, because it makes no sense to go to a country and guarantee the investment in renewable if you cannot guarantee also the investment of the network which will connect the wind or solar park to the system. And that's important to understand. And as to focus at the moment on utility scale project above 50 megawatts to make an impact. And of course, we know that the impact will also go to additional business model, even in mini grids. But unless you make a strong emphasis on deployment at scale renewable, this will not happen. And then, of course, we have to provide an holistic approach to the various phases of the project cycle. Next slide, I think we have some. No. Well, we have two booklets. One booklet is downloadable from the website. It is absolutely the booklet on renewAfrica, and at the end, I think we'll show the cover. And the other one is the outreach landing guide in the country. In this moment, we are doing both a lobby in Brussels to convince the Commission to adopt such a scheme with our support indeed. And the second issue is going countries. We were to Mozambique, now we are in Kenya. Next January, we are going to Ghana, and then Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Ethiopia, just to advocate the idea of those 6 countries chosen by us together could really respond to the provocation of having in Brussels a one-stop shop to make happening the guarantee. In fact, now I think the next speaker will concentrate on this one. Mr. Kiva, back to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vigotti. You have introduced the new project, renewAfrica, and whose thrust is to be able to boost the private sector project development in renewable energy. And as we have said, you are looking at the whole range of renewable energy so that the Kenyan sector can then be sufficient in energy. Also to note that we are geared towards assisting the private sector, and in Kenya we have also deliberately do agree that moving forward we need to attract a lot of private sector participation in our energy provision to be able to complement what our public generator Kenyan is doing. Thank you very much. At this juncture then we turn to Mr. Andrea Gattini, the Head of Business Development Africa and Middle East for Enel Green Power, who's going to talk about the industry interest to invest in the Kenyan renewable energy sector. Over to you, Mr. Andrea Gattini.
Good morning to everybody. Thank you, Engineering Kiva, for the kind introduction, and thank you, Mr. Vigotti, for giving me the opportunity to present the angle of the private sector in terms of the attractiveness of the African market and the opportunities that the private sector seek in the African market. So next chart, please. So in this chart, we are going to present why Africa is an attractive market for the private sector so far. Substantially, Africa needs, and as the electricity access, so does also the GDP. About 600 million people that have access to electricity and represent more than 5% of the global population's energy. So this having access triggered the fact that even the electricity consumption in Africa is way to the levels in Asia. So this provides important tool for growth. So demand in Africa is expected to grow at 3% only in sub-Saharan Africa in the coming year. And as a consequence, even the installed capacity may, of course, increase up to 200% during the same period. Next chart, please. So as we look at the renewable are a perfect fit to support this growth, either in energy and growth in terms of economy. Because the renewable technology are perfectly fit for three mainly reasons. First of all, the cost. So substantially, the renewable, mainly wind and PV today, has a levelized cost of energy already more competitive than whatever other technology, even thermal, new thermal technology that can be built. In terms of readiness to generate, so substantially the time to market for a renewable technology is extremely low compared to the long construction period required for a traditional conventional thermal power plant. And then fit to grid. So the sub-Saharan region experience a very favorable irradiation. And the favorable irradiation, of course, is a perfect prerequisite for either utility scale, but also distributed generation, mainly on solar. And the distributed generation also allow to facilitate, is an enabler for the access to energy, and also the PV utility scale may also support the distributed generation, thanks to the modularity of the technology. Then also in terms of job opportunity. So far, the renewable energy sector has experienced more or less the creation of 12 million jobs worldwide. And the projection shows that we may arrive at 50 million by 2050. And also there are also proven experience that the renewable sector is becoming a perfect transition phase from the base coal economy, creating new skills, new competencies, new opportunities. We have, for instance, the example in reskilling program in Spain, Romania, and Poland region. Next one, please. In this context, of course, why the private sector is interested in, and what is the private sector is seeking for justifying, or in any case, to carry out investment in the African sector, and of course, even in Kenya. So substantially, the private sector can unlock investment in the African market, but there are main principles, at least 3 principles that need to be met in order to make the market attractive. First of all, a stable regulatory framework with clear market rules, and also substantially the uncertainty in the regulatory framework or the lack of a regulatory framework become an substantial inhibitor for the proper RES deployment. The visibility on the new capacity, key element that is linked, of course, on the renewable policies. So the independent power producer, but also the manufacturer that localize part of the local production or the service they can provide in the country, aims to stay for a long time. Investments require, let's say, a visibility or long-term plan in order to justify proper investment. So substantially having a proper medium long-term plan for additional energy capacity to meet the growing demand, and also in the case of renewable, extremely important, a proper network development plan to ensure a sustainable generation growth, mainly to facilitate the distribution generation or to guarantee the stability of the network. And of course, what is important is predictable regulatory framework and procurement policy. So there are no changes, so that there are no risks to perceive an investment remain, let's say, facing a substantial variation in terms of what was the original scope. And then the long-term predictability revenues. The long-term predictability revenues can be achieved through main pillars. One is through competitive processes in order to conclude long-term PPAs with suitable security packages. And the other one is, of course, to have different possibility to enter in a market. So a diversified energy market for mitigate revenues stream. These, of course, represent so the de-risking of the market and the long-term visibility on revenues substantially unlocked cheap financing, and therefore assure that the cost for the end users will become much lower. Next, please. Just a quick glance at Enel Green Power. Enel Green Power, who doesn't know who is the company currently, is a market leader in the energy sector worldwide. We are present in 21 countries. We have more than 50 gigawatt of total capacity, and we are operating 1,200 plants. Only in Africa, the company is operating more than 1.4 gigawatt in the sub-Saharan Africa. And all this capacity has been secured through competitive processes in countries with a stable regulatory framework. In Kenya, the company is also present through an active development. And of course, we are working with renewAfrica and Rest4Africa in order to identify barriers and try to provide our support to create an enabling environment for future investments. Next, please. Enel Green Power belongs to the Enel Group. So recently, the Enel Group has anticipated to full decarbonization of its fleet by 2040. This will be translated in 100 gigawatt additional renewable capacity by 2030. And of course, Africa is also part of this plan, ambitious plan. To conclude, so today's meeting, I'm to build a concerned, next one, please. To build concerted effort for effective renewable deployment in Kenya. Today, we are aiming to present the Rest4Africa Investor Survey and the main perceived investments risk in the country. In particular, we are going to present the missing link and the investor survey, as I said. To present the approach which renewAfrica is proposing. We are also aiming to discuss the Rest4Africa proposal with the local stakeholder in order to attract the attention of Kenyan energy stakeholders regarding the approach and the mission of renewAfrica. And the last but not the least, we are aiming to get your feedback and suggestions from the participant as a key additional feature for a successful renewable support program in Kenya. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrea Gattini, for that presentation. You have clearly indicated that there is a potential in Africa for renewable energy. You have also said that the renewable energy sources are well equipped to respond to the growing demand for energy, and also highlighted what the private sector is looking for in order to be able to scale up renewable energy in Kenya, including the regulatory framework, generation expansion planning, long-term revenue predictability, and market diversification, and finished off with showing us an example of what Enel Green Power is doing, not only in Africa, but other parts of the world. Thank you very much for bringing this perspective. And now I want to turn to EIB, who are the EU Climate Bank, so that they can be able to share on their energy policy and also matters to do with energy transition programs. And without further ado, let me invite Mr. Martinez Guzman. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, everyone. I wanted to thank you, renewAfrica, for giving us the opportunity to participate in this event today, where I will try to explain what is the roles of the public institutions, what is the EIB, and what the EIB can do to support the renewable energy in the continent and in Kenya in particular. Can we please start with the presentation? Thank you. So for those who don't know, who is the EIB? The EIB is the European Union Climate Bank. We're a public institution. It belongs to the European member states. And in recent times, we have decided to become the EU Climate Bank. We want to align our activities to support the climate change mitigation and adaptation. And because it is a global phenomenon, we want to support the fight against the climate change everywhere in the world. Next one, please. To give you a few elements of background, the IB is the biggest issuer of sustainable and green bonds worldwide. We started more than 20 years ago with the first green bonds programs, and based on our standards, many other financial institutions are using the same approach and revitalizing the sector of the green bonds. Next one, please. With 65 billion of lending only last year, we are the biggest multilateral institutions. Perhaps we are not so well known because we do most of our lending inside the EU. But outside the EU, we finance about 15% of our total lending. And in particular, Africa is one of the regions in which we do more and more every year. Next one, please. So as I said before, last year, the IB decided to become the EU Climate Bank. And for that, we designed a climate road bank. It's a way, roadmap, sorry. It's a way for us to become fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. In that sense, we will stop financing fossil fuels by 2021. More than 50% of the total EIB lending will be towards sustainable and green projects. In that sense, we will prioritize innovation and digitalization as a way also to cut emissions, because we feel that a more interconnected and digital world is better also to avoid these emissions. We support sustainable agriculture, forestry, bioeconomy, green cities, renewable energy, low transport. The IB will align all its activities in all sorts of economic sectors in order to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. That's the key message. It's not just energy, but it's everything we do. The way we grow our food, the way we dress, the way we manufacture our products, everything will need to be aligned with the Paris Agreement, because if we do that, that's the only way to really solve this problem that is coming faster and faster. This one, please. So 2 years ago, the EIB approved the energy lending policy. That's particular for the energy sector. In that sense, we decided to stop supporting fossil fuels, as I said before, but we will also support innovation in energy efficiency and renewable energy, because many of the technologies that we will need to achieve the full decarbonization by 2050, as that's what the EIB is intending to do, these technologies are no longer in here. They don't exist yet. So that requires us to invest extensively in RDI, research, development. So in the coming years, we have only a few decades, we need to create these technologies as a way to reach these goals. The EIB decided also to support energy storage, electric vehicles, and green transport, as I said before. And in terms of decarbonizing the energy supply, we will try to support further financing of hydropower, solar PV, wind, geothermal, and in general, renewable energy technologies. But that's not sufficient, because we need to ensure people have electricity in their homes. One of the key tools for the decarbonization of the economy is the electrification. And in that sense, the EIB, and in particular in Africa, we will try to ensure that the people have access to electricity as a way to foster development and to decarbonize the economies. Next one, please. So we're in Africa. There are some challenges. What happened in Africa? Why all these investments are being undertaken in different continents and not so much in Africa? Well, we think that there are some issues that we can contribute to solve as a public institutions. We need to ensure affordability and low emissions while maintaining security of supply. Affordability is key. What we cannot do is to present a very expensive electricity matrix that nobody can really afford. We need to be able to bring electricity to the people in a way or with a price that they can pay. So in that sense, we feel that the renewable energy, because these are the most cost-effective and cheapest ways to produce electricity in most of the world, are the key. Low emissions is also crucial. We all understand that Europe and most advanced economies developed themselves using very dirty and not so clean technologies. But the reality is that they were the only technologies available at the time. So that's not the future. The future is that development and clean generation can be combined. So what we would like to do is to support Africa develop its own electricity matrix, but in a way that is cleaner and better than it was before. Security of supply, also one of the key elements we will assess. Many renewable energy technologies are intermittent, They are difficult to forecast. So what we'll try to do is to add technologies that can contribute to increase the security of supply, like storage, smart grids, proper management. Another key element that we feel in Africa is sometimes missing is the adequate environmental, social, and governance practices. We all are aware that most of these renewable energy projects are in the environment. They are not in the cities, they are in the countryside, they're in rural areas. In these places, you need to respect the people that live there. So we need to contribute to the production of electricity, but in a way that is sustainable and is aligned with the defense of the biodiversity and the people. The most important, the people. We need to support local manufacturing and expertise. The problem we see sometimes is that some countries in Africa, they lack adequate expertise, but it's very simple. It's because these technologies, they were not present a few years ago. It's normal that you still need to develop this expertise. As a public institution, we want to foster the creation of local manufacturing as a way also to transfer this knowledge and expertise. It will be a universities or studies centers, but the idea is that in Africa, people are able to develop their own sources of power, and we as a public institution will be happy to help. It's very important that I'm not implying that we need to apply any protectionism or any protection measures that we are seeing in some countries. We feel that the free market and the free trading is crucial also to achieve these goals. But at the same time, it is perfectly compatible with fostering investments in manufacturing and local expertise. We feel that the political risk sometimes is high, but also that the financial instruments that could mitigate this are not always there. Andrea Gattini talked before about a myriad of different instruments that are not, let's say, combined, but as a public institution, and it's important for us, we're trying to do what we think is better for the sector. What we will try to do this time is to look at the full picture and try to design the right financial instrument that allow the deployment of these projects. And as I said before, we need to allow an integral approach. There is no one size fits all for all the countries in Africa because the issues with Kenya are completely different than the issues from South Africa and from Morocco. Africa is a continent and we cannot apply a very, let's say, short-mind approach. We need to design tailor-made solutions for one and each of the countries and to do what is best for them. So at the same time, using the right tool, we can provide long-term stability and visibility because it's one of the things that the sector really needs and the private investors require. We feel, conclusion, that with the right tools, Africa will be the right place to be. And by the right place, I mean the right continent for the private investors and the public sector to deploy and to grow. Last one, please. I'm giving just some examples of projects recently financed by the EIB, hydropower plant in Uganda, Olkaria geothermal in Kenya, and of course, we cannot forget, as I said before, of grid and solar systems, because we need to bring all technologies to the people irrespective of the size of the projects. This one, please. Okay, thank you. So I wanted to finish only basically thanking renewAfrica because the EIB participated in this initiative from the very beginning. We see very important way to cooperate between the public and the private sector. The public sector will need to create this instrument, to create this environment, and then we need to give space to the public sector to deploy and to build the projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martinez. That's very good indeed, and good delivery, and saying that Africa is a place to be. We can agree with you more. You have given what EIB does as the climate bank supporting EU climate policy, and you have an array of instruments to facilitate sustainable finance. And very key that we need to align with Paris Agreement because our focus is on that, and also transition to green economy and prioritizing innovation and digitalization. Thank you so much indeed. EIB is a worthy partner in Kenyan energy sector development, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. For those who are asking whether there is a Q&A, indeed, at the end of the remaining presentations, which are not very many, we're going to have avenues where people can be able to make interventions. So that one is coming. So just hold on to the comment you have. We're going to have some time. And I want to thank the speakers because they are going well and saving us time for us to be able to interact later. So at this time, then let me then move over to the other key presentation for the day, and this is about a presentation on the main investment risk in the Kenyan energy sector, a study which has been done, facilitated by Rest for Africa, which was being done by PwC. So allow me then to invite Jasmina Odzik, the Manager Climate Change at PwC, to be able to bring us these highlights of this study. You are welcome.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmina Hodzic. I am a manager in ESG climate change at PwC. I will today present you about a survey which we recently prepared in collaboration between PwC and the Rest for Africa Foundation. So just a little disclaimer here, I am the one speaking, but this has been a collaborative effort. So many thanks to the Rest for Africa Foundation team who did a really great job. This survey, it investigates investment risks affecting renewables in 6 African countries. These countries have been selected as Tier 1 for the renewAfrica initiative, and they include Kenya. So the purpose of the study, the essence of it, is to bring the voice of investors. So it tries to filter, it tries to collect and then filter and then provide the voice of these investors to really convey what is it that investors in the private sector consider to be the most important aspects of investing in renewables in these selected countries. In addition to providing the views of the private sector, in the last 2 editions of the survey, so a little parenthesis, this survey has been done originally for the Med region. But then in the last 2 versions of the survey, we also included the views of the public sector. The reason for that being that we wanted to also be able to compare these different views and see what are the similarities and differences. So yeah, voice of investors. Here in this slide, you see some very basic figures. So 116 persons participated in the survey. Out of these 116, 36 gave their view on Kenya. So respondents could choose different countries on which to rate. Out of these 36, 29 represent the private sector, 7 represent the public sector. This proportionality in numbers is to be expected because naturally the private sector is more numerous. There is more companies than there are public institutions. So this is very much expected. Here you see on the right-hand side some institutions. So there is some from professional services and finance. Industry is represented by 15 respondents. Just a quick note, when we say 36 respondents, they are generally representing middle management or senior management of individual companies. And we tried to limit the response to 2 persons per company. Right, so it's not 36 persons randomly chosen, but they are middle manager or senior management in Rest for Africa stakeholder network. Okay, so with that premise here, just a quick methodological note of how we came to our results. So this methodology, it has been established in the investor survey series. So as I said, we did it already for the Med region. So here we adapted it a little bit, but fundamentally we have 26 risks that are grouped in 5 areas. These areas broadly correspond to the project cycle of renewable investment. So you start with some upstream risks such as legal and regulatory framework. Then you move on to revenues. So what are the risks that could endanger the revenues from the project? Then on to construction and operational risks. So in here, we also include the availability of local skills to both construct and maintain the plants. Moving on to financial structuring, this is obviously a high risk area, includes things such as interest rate, inflation risk, tax, and also very basic finance, the availability of finance. And then lastly, not least important, is environmental and social issues. So things such as social acceptance, environmental impact procedures, and so on. So sometimes we talk about risks, other times they are better understood as barriers. So in this survey, I often use these two words interchangeably. Okay, now what we did is that for these 26 risks, we simply asked persons to rate how they perceive this risk in a specific country, so in Kenya, on a scale from 1 to 4, so from very low to very high. Okay, so now I have 2 slides on results, and here they come. What you see here is a graph that shows the top 5 risks of that private sector respondents see in Kenya. The number in the box simply represents the percentage share of respondents who consider that risk to be high or very high. Okay, so the top one that comes out is land rights. Here it is disputes over land allocations are seen as causing delays or cancellations to projects. This is quite strongly perceived by investors. Part of the reason certainly is related to the Lake Turkana project. So this project, it has been a great success. It also has quite a bit of lessons learned. And so one big lesson learned is also related to land rights. And so many investors have this perception that this remains quite a high risk also to any future project. Second risk, transparency and fairness of market mechanisms. What we mean by this, we are referring to the potential availability of procurement mechanisms such as auctions. And in Kenya, investors have tended to point out that renewables tend to be procured through bilateral agreements, and these agreements are not always fully transparent. Well, many of them are by nature confidential. And so the absence of transparent information contributes to a perception of risk, because investors have communicated that they would gain greater confidence if there would be a transparent auction mechanism. So again, these are perceptions. Obviously, some projects have worked very well. Lake Turkana has been is hailed as a major success, so it can work also without. But it is important for investor confidence to introduce greater degrees of transparency. Then I have 2 risks that are more structural. It's political risk and dispute resolution. They are a bit more complex. There is not a quick solution to them. So I will skip over them. In the study, they are elaborated in a little bit more detail. Last risk, certainly also very important, is grid access. So over 45% of respondents consider it to be a very high concern. And this evidence from this survey points to the importance of the Grids for Africa initiative, which has been launched just a couple of months ago by the Rest for Africa Foundation. So we know that Kenya does have some, starting to see some issues with curtailment. It could get even more acute if more investments are not secured. This is obviously, we're talking about Kenya now, but this is a problem all across the region. So grids is absolutely on the minds of investors when it comes to renewables investment. Okay, and with that, I come to my last slide. I've tried to be brief here. It's another evidence of what comes out of the survey. It seems a little bit complex, but it's quite simple, really. So on the left-hand side, we have the top 10 risks as seen by the private sector. And on the right-hand side, we have the top 10 risks for the public sector. And so what this chart shows us is the difference in views. And I find it quite interesting to see what are the differences. So the main one is political risk and grid access, which in here I highlighted in red. So political risk is the second most important risk for the private sector, and it is the second least important for the public sector. And so this divergence in views tells us that probably these 2 sides need to talk a little bit more about it. So this is exactly an area where B2G dialogue is needed to understand what are the needs of investors. Because if the public does not perceive it as a problem, then maybe the solutions that they provide are not going to be fully responding to the needs of the market. And so that is why there needs to be a need there is a need to bring these views closer together. Very similar topic with grid access. As I mentioned before, investors see this as a top priority issue. The public does not seem to prioritize it all that much. So it's on position number 10 in terms of acuteness of the risk. So again, greater B2G dialogue is needed so that investors can communicate their views of what are the priorities, and so that the public, when they prioritize policy actions, so that they address the areas that are most acutely need solutions. Other topics, I do care to say that IPP market access, topics that are kind of related to the classic regulatory topics, in these areas, Kenya has made major progress over the past decade, and we have seen it in the success of the recent projects. There is obviously, Kenya is a forerunner regionally and arguably in all of Africa. So investors do recognize it, and you see that IPP market access rules is quite low on priorities. But there are some more structural and arguably more difficult topics to be dealt with. So land rights and political risk, they require quite a bit of structural engagement from the policymakers. Grid access requires a lot of investments, transparency of market mechanisms. I know that the legislature is already working on a potential auction mechanism, but so these are topics that are now on the to-do list once that the IPP market access has been kind of addressed, and it's going quite well. With that, I believe I've come to the end of my time. Thank you very much, and on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Jasmine Odzik, for bringing out the results of the analysis, looking at the risks which are there. And obviously, this will inform the dialogue between the public and private sector to see how to mitigate these risks so that in the end, we can have a sector which runs properly and bringing out the key issues where there are interesting divergences. Thank you so much. And now I want to go to the two last presentations, which are going to be very short. And this is a perspective of the local public and private sector. In the first one, we're going to have Mr. Paul Mbudi, the Deputy Director at the Renewable Energy at the Ministry of Energy. And after that, we will then go over to George Aruru, Chairperson of ESSAC, which is affiliated to KEPSA, the umbrella body of the Private Sector Association in Kenya. Mr. Mbudi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to everyone else. I think this has been quite an interesting discussion. Yes, indeed, the issue of the public and the private participation in this entire process is of a great concern, because I do recall that when we started the issue of geopolitical and financial challenges, are the restraining factors, among others, which are making Africa not accelerate investments in renewables. Secondly, just before I go to the 3 points that I'm going to be making, I think it is important that everybody, of course, we need to bear in mind that transition has begun. The momentum is already in place, and we see the world now very quickly trying to accelerate the transition to cleaner forms of energy. And that means renewable energy is at the heart of this transition. And importantly, we need to bear in mind that the technology costs are still declining quite fast. And therefore, this could, in the near future, be able to disrupt a lot of what we see as a business as usual. So in this sense, both the private and public sectors need to bear in mind that businesses are likely to be disrupted by these very rapidly changing landscapes of technology transitions. Now then, let me go to the next slide, and I will speak about 3 things that are important for us to bear in mind. First of all, looking at the current status of the Kenyan energy sector and the challenges and opportunities. As I speak, we are talking about 22 IPPs who are responsible for 37% of the current installed generation capacity. And in this sense, private sector are also operating some mini grids which are existing in the country. Important point to note within this process is the innovative financing and payment solutions that have been used for particularly the standalone off-grid solutions like solar home systems. And these have been very instrumental in driving the acceleration of access to solar home systems. We're talking about the pay-as-you-go systems. These have been quite instrumental, and we believe more business innovations are really needed to drive this process. Currently, the government is working on a public-private sector policy on transmission lines, just to look at the modalities of how these could be applied to support transmission line investments. And so this is an important area that we think is extremely important for the country to bear in mind. Now, looking at the challenges that we are experiencing, I think it is important to, first of all, observe that financing has been a serious and an ongoing challenge that we see all the time. And because of this, there is need to let all the parties, the development partners, the private sector, and the public sector to engage each other so that we can find ways in which to increase financing of projects. So this has resulted in slow development and implementation of generation projects. The other issue is the integration of variable renewable energy into the national grid, into the grid system. There is already some ongoing work which is happening in Kenya, and we are trying to resolve some of these challenges. Because of the variability of renewables, it is necessary that one has a very clear dynamic planning system and smart systems that could be able to synchronize these processes. Then there is a challenge of low grid demand. The demand has been, like in Kenya, has been slower than the generation pace. And this is something that requires that demand creation be a targeted point of intervention so that we can be able to grow both supply and demand. Then the issue of the limited ability to pay by some segments of the target market, this really calls for consumer financing, which we think would be needed to support this process. And so the last of the challenges as recorded there is the fact of substandard products and components, which we find, and this is because of technology dumping that we see happening in Africa. And this is a matter that requires that we really go into proper standards and labels. And of course, we need to ensure that we can be able to tell the quality products from those that are substandard. Let me go now to the last part of it is opportunities. Indeed, and my other speakers have ably stated that Africa provides a unique opportunity. One, we have a unique, huge potential of renewable energy that we have been endowed with. And this is something that we need to leverage on so that we can attract more investments into the region. And then there is a government commitment to develop renewable energy. And this is partly part of government responsibility. For example, the government has a responsibility for policy. It has a responsibility to oversight. It has a responsibility to mobilize resources. And this is part of that commitment. And then, of course, within the policy and the regulatory framework, that is of essence. So we already have, to support renewables, a feed-in tariff policy. We have a public-private partnership act that was done back in 2013. And we have draft mini-grid regulations. And then we also have a process that ensures that government support could be provided. So this, in a nutshell, provides you with the opportunities that the private sector needs to take advantage of, so that going forward, we can together be able to accelerate investment in renewable energy. Let me pause it there and take it back to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pombudi. Indeed, I cannot add anything more. I've been very clear on that. Let me now invite Mr. George Aruru. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Engineer Kiva. My name is George Aruru. I'm the chairperson of the Electricity Sector Association of Kenya. And this is an association that brings together independent power producers and also private participants in transmission, distribution, and generally also in the commercial and industrial sector. So we bring together the private sector that's active in electricity. And my presentation today will just shift us a bit more from what we've already heard from the previous panelists, and maybe just to look at what we see today, some highlights of what is today's challenges or opportunities, and then just to take a perspective on how we can then move this industry forward. And the first thing we see from the private sector perspective is that today we have inadequately connected demand pockets. We have issues regarding grid stability, especially as we put in more variable renewable energy. And then we tend to have a resource that doesn't really match the way demand is behaving in Kenya. So, for example, we have good nighttime wind, and at the same time we have really poor nighttime demand. We are flaring geothermal in the night, which really is not the best way to use our resource. Then we also do see that, I think as also mentioned by the previous presenter, we have quite a good set of resources in Kenya. But these resources are stranded. So we have stranded super resources. We have very strong wind resource, very strong solar resource, very strong geothermal capabilities. But these are then much greater than what we see as the demand in Kenya or the current needs in Kenya. So with this in mind, what then can we do? And I think for us as an association, we really must take a more kind of forward-thinking approach. And this is depicted in the giraffe's vision. We had our former president, who people used to joke that has the vision of a giraffe, can see tomorrow. So, and this is the kind of approach we're also calling for on our side. And the first thing is around continuing the work that is going on in grid strengthening. I think we need to densify the customers. We need to improve the quality of supply. That means a lot more investment in transmission and distribution, both at KETRACO and KPLC level. Then in terms of creating that demand, I think since we are blessed with these super resources, there are some industries, green industries, that we can shift our economy towards. So things like power to hydrogen, we can enable the kind of resource that we have to help us produce hydrogen in these periods that we have a weak demand, especially in the night. And such kind of industries would then also help us to snowball into other things like fertilizer, e-fuels, which in their own selves will substitute what we are doing in agriculture, what is happening in transportation in terms of importation of fuel. So this is something we see we must work towards. This, of course, will mean matching industries and also will come with their own associated economic development and job opportunities. So green industries is something that we see as a potential good solution to help us maximize on the renewable energy resource that we have. And the other thing we see from the association point of view is storage and e-mobility, and not just for mobility, but for grid stability. So of course, the storage is straightforward. We have variable resources. We would do with a lot more storage to help to kind of program these renewable energy resources to the way our demand is behaving. In terms of e-mobility itself, other than just replacing fossil fuel, when these whether it's bicycles or cars or maybe even trains at the point where we can have electrified trains, these ones will really help us to manage the way our demand and supply situation kind of mismatches at the moment. And the other thing is regional integration. So we, as the association, also see ourselves as being a key player in the region. We cannot work in isolation and hope that the kind of resources we have as a country would be fully exploited. So there is a whole bigger market out there in Eastern and Southern Africa. We see ourselves in Kenya as being strong in wind and geothermal. We see strengths in hydro from Ethiopia and Uganda. And there is a need to first, of course, complete those regional interconnections and then create some kind of market that allows us to trade. And in that trading, we can then balance seasonality in these resources and also the intermittence that we see on a day-to-day basis. So for us also, it's really big and strategic for Kenya as a leader to move towards shaping that conversation at regional level to integrate more and trade more in terms of renewable energy resources. Thank you, Chair. I think that's where I will end for today.
Thank you very much, George. Indeed, very good observations, and we continue to value the partnership of the private sector and the Kenyan public sector, because we need the two of us to be able to put to scale our developments in renewable energy. At this juncture, friends, I want to turn to just to get some of your reactions to what has been said by our speakers, and this will just be, I will start with some feedback, brief feedbacks from colleagues in this call. Let me start with I will have the Italian embassy in Kenya perhaps give an intervention, a feedback, and then we'll have the CDP, which is the Italian Cooperation Agency, in that order, and then I'll tell you the others. Just keep it short so that you can be able to get to hear from other participants also. Italian Embassy, is it you, Ambassador?
Thank you, Mr. Kiva, and thank you also, Mr. Bigotti, Aruru for Africa, for organizing this very interesting and important initiative. To be short, I would like just to focus on some elements that come out from our discussion today. I think one is the great potential for the development and further development of renewable energies in Africa, and in particular in Kenya. As we all know, that the capacity of Kenya in renewable energy reached 80%, was also mentioned, if I'm not wrong, some days ago by President Kenyatta in his speech to the nation. But it's not just a great potential, as Mr. Mubuti emphasized, the energy transition is already ongoing. It's part also of a world process that we saw at Glasgow lately. And another important element that would I highlight, Kenya is committed to expand further this capacity, and as they express and through their policies and the national determined contribution as well. And so I think the most important aspect that the previous speakers focus on is how to unlock this potential, which requires necessarily how to mobilize private sector, and meaning how to attract investment and to keep, because this aspect is really a key. And President Draghi in his speech in Glasgow said that there is, of course, there is a pledge for one of the goals is to achieve $100 billion of US dollars per year by governments. But what is very important to focus on the enormous, much by far amount of money coming potentially from the private sector and also from international financing institutions, how to lead this, to bring this amount of money to the in project, in a sustainable project, which concern also, of course, renewable energy. So this aspect is fundamental, and so there is money. How to concretize this mining in project and to increase the renewable energy production, the main, I think, questions. And so I think there has been emphasized very well what are the main hurdles, the main challenges, I would say. One, also, for example, Mr. Gattini, but also Mrs. Jasmina also mentioned how to establish a stable regulatory framework, which is key for attracting investment. And also the lack, for example, most very important to increase the tender and the procurement procedure based on international procedures. And another aspect very important, how to improve the right access, will requires a lot of investment, but again, this leads us to focus on the other. So I think it's Kenya is a perfect example how you to maximize this, let's say, also a willingness of the big funds, companies to invest, and at the same time moving forward even better framework for investments. And what I would like to mention, to emphasize on this point, that Italy support fully this process and this energy transition start, and actually already in a good phase from Kenya. In Kenya, we are supporting projects through our development cooperation, especially microgrid, which is fundamental, especially to facilitate the access to electricity for everybody, which are lower cost, because now it's possible to lower cost. And we will continue to explore further opportunity and initiative of cooperation, collaboration in this field. So this is our first point that I wanted to raise, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for reinforcing the support and the working relations between Kenya and Italy. We look forward to continuing to work together. At this juncture, let me invite a representative from Italian Cooperation Agency for a quick feedback. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Kiva, and also thank you to Mr. Dot and renewAfrica for this interesting and important event organized for Kenya. Also, a greeting to Ambassador Pieri and the whole audience. Very quickly, some information on CDP. CDP is an Italian publicly owned financial institution which has been traditionally focused on domestic lending, so lending in Italy to public authorities on the infrastructure projects. Recently, the law has given the mandate to CDP to act as the Italian development finance institution. And so we are now very active in looking at geographies such as Africa and Kenya in particular, where we can provide financing in the climate sector. We are focused on renewable energy deals for sure, and also which can have a positive impact on climate. We are, as I was saying, very interested in Kenya because we think that Kenya, such as other countries, have a lot of potential in terms of natural resources, economic environment, and so we try to partner also with the EIB and other financial institutions, for example, African Development Bank, in order to provide support and financing to projects in the country, in the private sector. Just another word to keep it very very short in order for the audience to make any questions. To renewAfrica, we decided to support renewAfrica because we think that the one-stop approach, stop-shop approach that it has is a winning aspect in this game. To gather in one unique approach, in one unique instrument, advocacy, technical assistance, finance aspects for sure. I think they are the environment, the enabler, the real enabler in order to make things happen in Africa and also in Kenya. And that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luca. Let me also turn to the Global Wind Energy Council. Please, the representative, you can give a short feedback. All right, if not there, then let me turn to others also in the call. Let me introduce Ann Kiburi from Kenyan, the public generator, just for some quick intervention.
Engineer Kiva, thank you, Rest for Africa, and thank you, the Italian government. Yeah, at Kenyan, we are focused on supporting the government towards achieving the universal access. We are the main government agency tasked with the mandate of developing generation projects, and our strategy is focused on development of renewable energy and other plants like the hydro plants and battery storage. We've been working with various agencies who've been supporting us with funding, like EIB, who are represented here. And we are also keen on innovative solutions that can be able to support the government objectives. Some of them being the green hydrogen development, which we are keen on participating to develop this kind of technology. And we are also keen on mobilizing different innovative kind of financing. And we know the role that the private sector plays in this. And to that end, at Kenyan, we are looking at developing some of the resources through public-private partnerships, since we have a supporting act. And we're also keen on having resources from other innovative financing sources like the green bonds and also through strategic partners. So we are keen on also getting into R&D and working with other partners to advance research and development in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne, for bringing that perspective from Kenyan, the public generator. Let me also ask Jonathan Butu, from Renewable and the Rural Electrification Renewable Energy Corporation. Please give a.
Thank you very much. Thank you much, Engineer Kiva. Good morning, good afternoon, the participants. My name is Jonathan Butu from REREC. I will also make a few comments, and especially in relation to this workshop. Thank you for the team who put up this together. It's been quite informative, just to understand the industry, the landscape of the industry in Africa and even globally. It's been very interesting to see how much NL has been able to do in this sector, and we're probably hoping that they can grow their portfolio in the country. As a corporation, following the enactment of the Energy Act 2019, then we have had increased focus on renewable energy projects, both promotion and development. Then, therefore, this discussion is very key. Is very key to us. It's very important for us just to understand how the industry is evolving or developing. As a corporation, we are keen on development of projects across all the technologies in renewable energy, from the traditional or the more mature technologies, wind, solar, to even the emerging technologies. We will be looking at even exploration of or even reviewing how things like tidal energy is the potential of tidal energy in the country, matters of energy storage in various technologies. This is an area which has been growing very fast. So then it's an area then as a country or as a corporation we'll be looking at how we can leverage in the available technologies just to support the government strategy of universal access and even support of the grid. We are also keen on matters of e-mobility, as a new venture or as a new area of technology, both in terms of infrastructure development, the policy issues around that technology, just to make sure that then we have more greening of the mobility sector or the transport sector. And many other innovation, basically many other innovation happening around the renewable energy sector. The corporation will be very keen to participate or to develop in those areas. So thank you very much for this information. We will pick a few information and even the financing options shared by some of the presenters at this meeting. There are matters we'll be looking at and trying to develop a discussion around them. Thank you very much, Engineer Kiva. Back to you.
Thank you, Engineer Butu. Let me turn to the rest of us. If you want to make a comment, you can show me by raising your hand. I can see Jessica Adams. This must be from AMDA, and then if any other, and please keep it short so that we can have variety as much as possible. Jessica, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Engineer Kiva. It's lovely to be here, and thanks for the invitation today. I have a couple of questions for the speakers. I guess the first question that I have is to Jasmine. On the risk allocation, where you were looking at the comparison between private sector and government for Kenya, a lot of what was highlighted is what are high risk for private sector and low risk for government. But there was one aspect that came up that was a concessional risk, which was really high on the government side and really low on the private sector, private investment side. And I was hoping that you might be able to explain a little bit about what the concerns from the government are and how they view the risk of signing concessions or expanding the concession market. And then the other question that I have is for the representative from the European Investment Bank. In one of the earlier slides, there was a $2.2 billion that was allocated to Africa last year. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what those investments look like. Are they all utility grade projects? Is it debt? Is it equity? Is it a blend? Where are you investing? Just some additional information on where your investment perspectives in Africa looks like.
Thank you, Jessica. Perhaps you could go to get quick answers to those. Let's start with Jasmine and then to Martinez.
I believe Yasmin had to go. I'm sorry for that, but certainly either Ivana or Carlo can try to answer. Otherwise, we will be sure that she will answer you directly tomorrow. I'm sorry for that. It is a very specific topic and she had to leave before. Unless Ivana or Carlo can say something, but Jessica, be sure we're going to be back to you. Don't worry. And maybe we can send to you the full report so you can take a look at the report.
Thanks so much.
That's to you, sorry.
Yes, good morning, Mrs. Stephens. Many thanks for your question. We confirm that what Mr. Vigotti just said. We're going to take your question and give it to Ms. Hodzic, and we'll come back to you tomorrow, also giving you the report. And please, also the other participants, let us know whether you want to report, and we will send you the link through the renewAfrica Secretariat email. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ivana. Mr. Martinez, any quick comment on the question?
Thank you. Thank you. Very, very good question. I had a slide prepared, but because of the short time available, it could not possible. So basically, the AV, like any other public institutions, we work based on certain mandates. In our case, we follow the mandates of the EU Commission, the EU, the European Union in Africa. The mandate we have in Africa is focused especially on development and climate. So within this context, we want to support the private sector development and we want to support the climate. We use all sorts of financial instruments as a way to contribute to these sectors, to the development. We work with equity products. The IB becomes an investor in private equity funds, which invest in all sorts of companies, from renewable energy companies to off-grids, microgrids, energy efficiency, but also agriculture or standard SMEs in the region. The IB also is lender to local commercial banks in Africa. So basically, we lend money to these banks and they all lend the funds to the final beneficiaries. These final beneficiaries typically being companies that undertake activities or work in sectors aligned with the EU objectives. Typically in Africa, we see agriculture, we see transportation, we see standard SME. We want to support the small and medium enterprises because those are the companies that create more jobs. And we feel that supporting with all sorts of products is useful. But of course, the EIB has also public sector loans. We lend to governments to build all sorts of projects from grids, transmission grids, to roads or airports or ports. And simultaneously, we also support the private sector, providing more finalist loans like project finance or corporate loans. And we work with the typical big companies, but also with local companies. So what I can tell you is that basically we try to support the continent, the region with all sorts of products as a way to have a much better impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Martinez. Is there any other who wants to ask something, Wagari?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Engineer Kiva. My name is Wangari Mshiri from the Global Wind Energy Council. I was trying to unmute earlier when you called upon us. But the Global Wind Energy Council has recently launched a new initiative called Africa Wind Power, where we want to increase the deployment of wind power across the continent. As you know, and as George Aruru mentioned earlier, Kenya has great wind resource, especially in the morning, just before the sun rises. Something that we should take advantage of to especially to bring down the cost of power in Kenya. And so we want to work with the government and with all of you on this call to ensure that we increase wind power as a key resource in Kenya. Thank you so much, Engineer.
Thank you, Agari. Indeed, we work together, and thank you for that intervention. We together, wind forms a key element of our energy mix, and we'll be looking forward to more discussions. I see a hand from Myra Mukulu, of course.
Thank you, presenters, for all you presented. And I see there's a lot of interest in the electricity sector for Kenya, for lighting and for powering other options. What I want to ask is if there is any interest in supplying clean cooking solutions, looking at what cooking solutions can be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vigoti, who is going to answer that. Are we looking also at the clean cooking solutions?
Well, thank you so much. We do have also on water, energy, food, a business model, a sector we deal with. We don't do directly clean cooking, but we do rural electrification through the concept that water, energy, food nexus can really solve the issue of growth of the income of the family and prepare for their inclusion. So definitely on this business model, we are applying to agro-industry food, district to rural electrification, to health and COVID, but not directly on clean cooking because this is not our main issue. But of course, we have a lot of contacts that we'll be glad to share. Now, my intervention, so sorry for that, but that's out of our first scope, maybe in the future. Let me just say, Mr. Kiva, Dr. Kiva, that I want to reiterate when we go to a country, well, Kenya for us is a friendly country, there's not much to add. We know we get immediately a response from you, and the intervention by the two gentlemen from the public sector already outlined the key issue we have to deal with. When we go to a country like Kenya, we bring also the UNECA study we done together on the regulatory and policy analysis of the sector. This in-depth review that Madame Vera Song wishes to report with us soon. We also have this Grids for Africa issue. We want to underline the idea that even Kenya may need some kind of private sector involvement in the infrastructure deployment. At the meeting we had last time, the regulator of Kenya was present there, and I think we will further exploit this issue, that they have to go planning grids, financing grids must go end to end with the planning with the renewable. Finally, we also, of course, we have the risking instrument we think we are approaching today, and also we are preparing a final study on the social impact and job creation of the transition. not only generally speaking, like IRENA, 12 million jobs, but country by country will try to do reskilling their jobs to make this happen. Now, my final announcement that we engage in, if you prefer so, Engineer Kiva, once we find the topics that you underline are critical, your colleague, we are willing to come back to you, to the Kenyan government, in a closed-door meeting, to have an in-depth review of private sector discussion, discussing those items that were highlighted by the two gentlemen before. So my offer that whenever you are ready, early next year, we could also go in depth to have a closed door technical, strategic policy discussion among us to support you from the point of view of private sector who wants to make sure that you are fastly approaching the possibility of investing together. So capacity building, institutional, for us is a must, and I'm glad to, even together with European Investment Bank, we would like to make a special training course for policymakers like you and your colleagues. And I know that the European Investment Bank will be glad to announce this soon with us. So take my offer, and then mid-January, end of January, we could go back to you if you wish so to discuss a closed door technical issue that you presented. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vigotti. Indeed, this is a good point for us to start concluding and say that we will continue to reach out to you. Certainly, there is a need for more engagement between the public and private sector. We know we also need to bring on board other parties, some senior officers from the regulator to join us, but they were called for a meeting in which they are looking at some of the things that we are also discussing today. But good to note that today we have agreed that Africa is a place to be, and Africa, then Kenya is a place to be. That indeed we need to facilitate the private sector participation in energy provision. That is no doubt, and that is a cardinal objective of the government of Kenya. We've also discussed and seen some of the barriers which could be there to prevent a takeoff, and there is commitment from both sides of the divide that we need to bridge these challenges, we need to mitigate them, we need to move forward in a synchronized manner because we are committed to that, and the private sector is also willing to share ideas, to bring in innovation, to bring in their expertise in this, and therefore this is something we are going to do. We want to thank all the participants and all the presenters, also all those who gave intervention. No doubt this is going to enrich our discussion going forward. If you need a copy of the results of the study which was done, please reach out to Ivana. You can also write on the wall, or whoever invited you, if it is Rebecca from the ministry, Rebecca should be able to avail a copy of that report from Ivana, or directly even from Ivana and the team from Rest for Africa. What I would say is that Italy has been a very good partner to Kenya. We talk together, we look at ideas, and we agree on the way forward. And we want to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador, finding time to be here from the beginning to the end. We very much thank you. And we'll follow some other cooperation avenues with you on a separate note, and also at some appropriate time, maybe in the new year, we hope to arrange a meeting, a formal meeting with our cabinet secretary and our principal secretary, so that we can discuss further government to government support. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, Excellency Ambassador, Mr. Vigotti, and all the other captains and all the other representatives of the private sector, we want to thank you for giving us your 1.5 hours, and we wish you well. Thank you so much for being able to be part of this very great discussion and being very vibrant. We wish you a good day, the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.